Hey everyone, it's Cameron with Car Audio Now again. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be comparing Sony's new XAV-AX4000 and AX6000 together to give you a good understanding of some of their core features and of course their core differences so that you can make a decision on which one's better for your car. Obviously there's a cost difference between these two. They might look the same and they actually share a lot of the same interface and features, and I'll get into that later on in this review. But there are some core differences between the two that might make a difference in terms of which one you choose. So let me go ahead. I'm going to pull these two head units out of the box first and give you a close-up of the front and the back and note some of the visual differences and the specs first. Then I'm going to hook them up to power on my test bench and spot any differences in the interface that might be important to note. So let me do that. All right, so I've pulled these two units out of the box here so you can see them in a little bit more detail. I have the AX4000 on my left and then the AX6000 on my right. They're both the same. They're on the same single DIN chassis. They look very similar at first glance too, from the front and the side and the back. But one of the first things that I'll call out is the difference between the screens and the outer bezels. Both screens are a 6.95-inch screen, but the AX4000 here has what's called a resistive touchscreen with a noticeable outer bezel here, and the AX6000 has a capacitive touchscreen with a bezel-less design. You can see the outer bezel here a little bit more on the 4000, while on the 6000 you can see it's just a smooth surface. The bezel-less design definitely has a little bit more of a sleek look when you put it in your dash. It should fit a little bit more flush against the rest of the trim around and look a little bit more integrated, and that's really all. But just to give a little more detail in terms of the differences between resistive and resistive touchscreens like the 4000 here feel a little bit more like a cushioned surface when you touch them. You can use your nails or really anything to interact with the screen and the surface of the screen, while the capacitive screens, on the other hand, like the 6000, are a little bit more like your iPhone or an Android, where it feels like glass, right, when you touch it. And the only thing that it's responsive to is something that's conductive like your skin. So if you were to touch this, if you had long nails and touch the 6000, it really wouldn't interact. But the feeling on the capacitive is much closer to kind of the higher quality iPhone screen. And there's a little bit of differences in terms of the clarity. And I'll get a little bit more into that later on in the video. The buttons on the bottom here are identical between the two. Again, I'll get into their functions a little later on when I hook these up to my test bench. Both screens do have the same dot resolution of 800 by 480. So they're both the same resolution and both have an anti-glare surface. You can kind of see this on the side here in this little glare, how it's not like a mirror looking out at this way, right? So you can kind of see that. When I put these on my test bench, again, I'll be able to get a better sense of the screen quality for you, and I can note some of those differences. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to actually flip these over to their backside and start to talk through some of their other specs, the harnesses, inputs, and outputs. So let me flip these over for you. So now you're looking at the back of these units. I still have my AX4000 on my left and my AX6000 on my right. The harnesses for both of these units are identical. Let me go ahead and show you. Both of these units use the same power, ground, and speaker output harness. They use the same RCA input and output harness as well. You can see they have front, rear, sub out, and camera in, right? The biggest difference between these two units to call out with regards to inputs and outputs from these two harnesses, though, is that the AX4000 here has a 2-volt preamp output. So that means that all of these particular preamp outputs are at 2-volt. The AX6000 has a 5-volt preamp. So if you're building an amplified system, I would recommend the 6000 because of this. The signal to your amplifier is going to be better with a 5-volt preamp than it is a 2-volt. If you aren't planning on adding external amplifiers and you want to use the internal amplifiers that are built into these units, they're the same though. They both have 20 watts times 4 RMS, and that's their output to the 4 speakers, right, via the internal amplifiers. Looking a little bit more at the rear here, they both have the same USB-C, right? They have, let me pull these out. They have the same antenna. This is the GPS antenna that plugs in right here. They both have the same microphone that plugs in right here. Everything else is really pretty similar. You know, both another antenna. This is your standard radio input. iData link input if you wanted to hook it up to like a CAN bus system and see some of the details on your car, like RPM and stuff, right? They all share some of the same the inputs and outputs with that respect. The biggest difference here to note, and arguably probably the biggest difference between these two units, in my opinion, is when you're looking at this angle, is this little input right here. This is the HDMI input. On the 6000, the 6000 is capable of connecting to an external device and playing video and audio directly onto the screen via a mini HDMI cable input right here. So you know, you're going to probably want a mini HDMI to normal HDMI cable for most devices. You know, those are, I found one for like $8, and that's actually what I'll be using when I go to demo this unit, to connect my iPhone to this unit via a couple of adapters. This is probably a big deal though if you are looking for a multimedia player or not. If you want something to play video, I'll get more into the interfaces between the two when I hook them up to my test bench to show you kind of what that looks like when you plug this video in and whatnot. But if you want a video input, the AX6000 is going to be your choice. So I'm going to go ahead and hook these up to my test bench and then start to walk through some of the core features on the interface, give you a look at what the interface looks like between the two, how the features differ. I'll walk through how you play video on the HDMI and also hook up to USB. I'll give you one hint here. USB can't play video. It can play audio, right? And I'll give you another hint too. There's not, apart from that, there's not too many other differentiating features when you turn these units on. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to hook it up to my test bench, give these units power, and start walking through the interfaces of the two. So I now have both of these head units hooked up to my test bench and plugged into power. You have the AX4000 on the top and the AX6000 on the bottom. You can see the default home screen is the same. You can't tell the difference between them. And no, you also can't remove this big clock in the middle of the screen in the settings. I've had questions about that. But what you can do is change the background, which makes it a lot less noticeable, a lot more integrated. You can add a custom background. I'll show you that a little bit later. And you can also change out the location in apps that are in your favorites, and I'll get into that too. So I'm just going to go ahead and start running through some of the features, the differences between the screens and so on, the general interface. Starting with the apps, you know, the majority of the apps between the two units are identical here. You can see the list is the same with the exception of the HDMI icon down here and feature on the AX6000. And in terms of the screens, so if you look at the screens here, there's very little difference. You remember I mentioned that the AX4000 has a resistive touchscreen and the AX4000 has a capacitive. And you can tell a very slight difference between the two when you're looking at them side by side. The AX6000 just being a little bit brighter and a little bit clearer because there's no resistive layers that are between your finger and the screen, the LCD screen or the face of the unit, right? And on the bottom below the screen, you can see these buttons are identical, same with their functionality. So on the left-hand side, you know, you have your home, your volume, you have a customizable source or mute button here, and I'll get into how you customize this in the settings in a little bit. Next and previous track, previous next, pretty straightforward. And then the voice button here can be used to activate Siri on iPhones and Google's voice assistant on Androids, right? It doesn't really serve a purpose unless you're connected to your device though. So you can see I'm connected to the AX6000, but I'm not connected on this one. So, and this is what happens when you don't have a device connected. It's really, there's no purpose for it. But when you do have it connected, it'll activate Siri or Google's voice assistant again. Now, one of the things that I'll call out here on both of the, you know, with respect to new features on both of these head units is Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Both are wireless on these units, which is great. Finally, Sony only offered wireless on their XAV 9500 ES previously, which is that unit is a larger single DIN unit that's part of their mobile ES lineup, but they didn't offer it on their previous XAV products. So both of these units have wireless CarPlay and Android Auto now, which is great to see. You no longer have to purchase one of my recommended wireless CarPlay adapters that will take a wired CarPlay and adapt it into wireless. These come included. What's interesting though, and this is more of a note for some of the installers, is that there is an included GPS antenna on these devices. You might have seen those when I was going through some of the components. What's interesting and why it's related to Apple CarPlay is it's required. You have to wire that the GPS signal and the GPS antenna is required in order for CarPlay and Android Auto to work. If you don't install it, it shows you basically an error screen. I just wanted to call this out for the installers. Some of you who might have seen that GPS antenna earlier and wondered what the heck is this for, kind of like I did. But I reached out to the Sony, my contacts at Sony, and they described this a little bit more in depth for me and why it's required, saying that the GPS antenna is really meant to help improve just the accuracy and the positioning and movement in general. For example, if you put your phone upside down in the cup holder and you can see in your Maps app on Apple CarPlay, it's going like this, your arrow is going like this. That's what it's meant to help out with. So it just acts as kind of a supplemental accuracy tool for apps and so on. So if you look at some of the apps here, you have Apple CarPlay, radio, Sirius XM, right, Bluetooth, and then you obviously have all the apps in here. They're all the same between the two, with the exception of that HDMI. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to close up. I'm going to give a close up on the AX6000, and moving forward, I'm just going to walk through all these components on one of these head units, and just know that the interface on the AX4000 is identical to what you're going to be seeing here on the AX6000, with the exception of the HDMI. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to focus in on this and then continue on. Cool. So now I'm zoomed into the AX6000. Let's start. I'm going to go ahead and start just running through some of the basics, some of the apps that are available here, starting with the Apple CarPlay. I mentioned this is wireless. I've got my iPhone hooked up. You can see the icon right here, Apple CarPlay. This would be replaced with an Android Auto if you're hooked up to an Android device. I'm not going to get too into depth about CarPlay. CarPlay is relatively almost identical between all of the units. But what I can say is that there is no abnormal delays. The connectivity is fine. It worked as expected. The biggest thing is connectivity and delays with the wireless functionality, and I didn't see any abnormal delays. So functionality wise, Apple CarPlay works perfect as expected. You can see kind of my apps here, and just in general, the interface, it's the same as what would be on almost any other Apple CarPlay device, just in here. So that's as far as I'm going to get into details with CarPlay. There's plenty of videos that go through the specifics. Next, you have the radio here. So if you go into the radio, you can see it's a typical interface. There's 18 presets for FM and 12 presets for AM. Neither one of the units have HD radio, worth calling out, right? Standard interface here, not much to go through. Sirius XM, I do not have the tuner hooked up. There's a third party, or there's an additional adapter that you have to purchase. It's about $79 or $69 on Crutchfield that you have to purchase in order to get your account to work on these. It has like an antenna as well that you install. It plugs into the back of this unit. Just note Sirius is compatible on this unit, and it'll appear as it would on a normal interface. You'll have access to all of your channels and so on and so forth. Bluetooth, I'm not going to click this, but what Bluetooth does is if you have a device that's connected, a Bluetooth device, it's going to switch your source over to Bluetooth. Rear view camera, I'll give you a demonstration of this real quick. Basically, you can select to view your rear view camera if it's wired properly at all times. I have this hooked up to a switch, so I'm just going to quickly give you a demonstration. Boom. Hello, you can see me here. That's just my test bench camera, but you can access that and see at any times as long as that camera has power at all times. So that's an installation thing. You have settings, which I'll go through next. Devices and phone, that's for your Bluetooth device, right? Where you can make wireless calls. This defaults back to, my Apple CarPlay when you click on phone, right? One other thing that I wanted to mention here is if you wanted to change the location or pull in, for example, HDMI into your favorites, you could do that, right? So I don't use Sirius XM, so I'm going to pull that out, and I'm actually going to put HDMI in there because that's what I'm going to be demonstrating in a moment. So you can do that, kind of cool. And then when you go back, now you can see the HDMI is on there. You can adjust these on the fly just by tapping and holding them. So next, I'm going to go through some of the sources here. So, when you look at the settings here, the settings are identical between the two units, right? You have a couple of options. So let's just start going through a couple of the key things in here. I'm not going to go through every single component, but you have at the top, you have your device connection. This is where you go in, you can connect the device. Both of these units have the ability to pair up to and store up to 10 devices in here. You can see I have one, but you can store up to 10 and connect up to 10 devices per unit. You can't connect to 10 devices at the same time. You can only connect to one unit in order to play your music. But you can connect and save up to 10, and then you can switch on the fly. Like if I had a second one, I would click it, and then I would either select Bluetooth or Apple CarPlay, right? And when you have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto active, it'll default basically to whatever the last configuration. If you set that particular unit to use Apple CarPlay when you connect it, it will default to CarPlay every time you connect to it over the normal Bluetooth, right? And you can go in here and you can change back and forth if you wanted to, right? Change to Bluetooth. That would be changed to Apple CarPlay if it wasn't already selected that in the first place, right? This is a lot. I prefer to default to Apple CarPlay, and I'm sure Android Auto users would say the same. It's easier than the traditional Bluetooth that offers a number of feature enhancements. So it's nice that it just defaults to it. And now that it's wireless, every time you step in the car, it'll default to that too. The two units, though, do leverage Bluetooth 5.0 for those who want to use Bluetooth or only can use Bluetooth. So it's got the latest Bluetooth technology. Sony also includes what's called LDAC, which LDAC, which is Sony's term for high resolution wireless audio streaming. Basically, all that means is that the units won't compress or downgrade a high resolution audio file or content when you stream it wirelessly. There won't be as much degradation to the audio format and quality over some of the other units that use Bluetooth. So let me go back to the settings here. Moving on to the next section, which is a big one. You have the sound tab. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'll go through a couple of the key things. At the top, you have the equalizer, right? So the equalizer, this is both units have a 14-band adjustable equalizer along with a few presets here. You can see on the bottom, you can select through if you don't want to go through and actually adjust these manually. But if you did want to, you can go and basically, you can use a preset as a starting point, and then you can just kind of go through and tweak it. You can see it changed, and now you click and drag whatever frequency, and then see the save button here. You can save it to two different custom presets. Basically, it'll create a preset for you, a custom preset. So I'll save that. Now you can switch, between the two equalizers. Pretty cool, straightforward. Nice that it has a 14-band equalizer, right? And very easy to use in general. Subwoofer level, I'm not going to go through. I think that's pretty self-explanatory if you have a subwoofer. Balance and fader, very straightforward as well. But I want to get into two other ones here. One is the listening position, and what the listening position does for you is it allows you to adjust and customize the delay between your speakers. The sound takes longer to get to your ear from the rear back seat than it does the one that's up in your door panel or in your dash on the front left, right? The distance is far further. So basically you can come in here, you can either set one of the presets where you're sitting and where you want the focal point, where you want all of the music to converge at one point via one of these presets and where you're sitting. Or you can go into to customize your own. And what this allows you to do, you'll basically take and you'll measure the distance from your speaker, for example, your front left speaker in your door panel, to where you want to be seated, or where you want that music to reach to. And the most common location is the driver's seat headrest. That's where you're going to be seated. So you measure from the front left, front right, front rear, rear left, rear right to the headrest, and then you're going to enter these. You're going to enter in the distances there, and what that means is that all of the music will reach that point at the same exact time, so it's all in sync. So pretty cool. Something that's a recent addition, something that you'd see traditionally in like a DSP, but it's built into the unit. The next thing is below that is crossover. So the crossovers are where you can set the thresholds of the frequencies that go to each of the channels, right? So you don't want your front tweeters or your front 6.5-inch speakers, playing 20 hertz frequencies, right? Save that for your subwoofer. Or 50 hertz, right? Save that for your subwoofer if you have one. So that's what a crossover does. You can set those thresholds. And basically on this unit, you have the ability to set your high pass filter on both the front and the rear channels independently, which is nice for tuning. And you can also set the slope. On the subwoofer channel, you can also do the low pass filter, right? And the slope as well. And then you can reverse the phase. One of the things that is kind of missing here from my perspective is a band pass feature, or just in general the ability to change like high pass filter or low pass filter for each of these channels would kind of be nice. It'd give a little bit of more flexibility into the interface and customizability. I think the reality though is that if you're going to amplify your system and really need to interchange those and get that nitty gritty in terms of the settings, have a band pass option. You're probably going to use across the crossovers on the amplifier, or put an inline DSP in. And again, the equalizer and the crossover settings that I'm going through, the timing settings and listening position, they're all the same between the AX4000 and AX6000. So let me go back. I'll go back one more. So the next section in here is the customize section. So if you go into this area, there's two things to note, one of which is new to these XAV units, is the customize button. And you can do you have two different options to select for this particular button here, changing the function. You can choose mute or source change. I like mute because in general, you can, earlier you saw me customize the icons that are on the bottom of the home screen. You can use those to change sources. So having a mute button is kind of nice. Below that, you have the wallpaper select, and this is what enables you to go in and set a custom wallpaper, which is kind of cool. You can see I already did this here when I was testing this unit earlier, but I'm going to go through that process. I have a USB thumb drive that's connected to the back of this unit. It has all of my files on there. I have a couple test images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go in, and automatically it defaults to the root folder of your thumb drive, and you can see I've got a couple of different folders in here. I'm going to select images within that, test images, and then maybe I'll just select a different one. I'm going to put a boat on here, right? And I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to click OK one more time. And now you can see, go back home, you can see that the wallpaper, the home button, the home is now set to this custom image, and you can do that with any image. I think there's probably limitations, JPEGs, PNGs, those types of things. Check the instructions, but there you have it. And one of the things to note here is that when you put a background image instead of that black image, in my opinion, that clock really becomes a little bit less overwhelming. It kind of integrates a little bit better in my opinion, though. I'm gonna go back into settings, and then below customize you have the application settings. And in the application area, you can go through three things. Sirius XM, there's a reset. You have the iData link connectivity and settings in here. I don't have either one of those connected, so I'm not going to demonstrate those, but just know if you had either of those modules connected, those would not be grayed out like they are on mine. But what I can demonstrate is in the camera display, there's two things probably to note that are important. One is the camera view. You can either mirror it, flip it, depending on how it's installed, right? And then you can also adjust the guidelines, which is probably the most important of the features in here, where you, depending on where your camera is installed, how high it's installed, if it's to the left or the right, you can adjust the guidelines here and really tailor it to how your vehicle, your installation is on your particular vehicle, or you can remove it altogether if you don't like that and just want to see it. So pretty cool there. It's nice to have that functionality. Every car is different. And then the last thing I'm going to go through that's below the application is in the systems, specifically the steering wheel control settings. So if you purchase an aftermarket module adapter that will adapt your harness to this unit via, it looks like a headphone jack, then this might not be necessary for you to go and configure. But if you use the existing or the included steering wheel control harness, which is basically a headphone jack with two wires sticking out of it, you have to wire that up to your harness. You're going to probably use these. And what you can do is go in, once you've found the right wires, you've wired it up properly, you're going to go in here and you're going to program every single one of those steering wheel controls to the corresponding function in here. And the instructions will show you how to do that, but you can go through and set each of them and every one of these when you go to install that. So pretty cool, pretty straightforward. That's all I'm going to touch on in the settings though. So let me go back to the home screen. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the USB input or source. You can either plug in your phone directly into the unit via the USB input and charge it with a 3-amp charge, or you can add a USB thumb drive like I did and play music from it. The USB on both of these units, the AX4000 and 6000, they're both only compatible with audio formats. So you can't play video from USB on either of these units right now. And I'm going to repeat that because I think that's an important differentiator if you're trying to decide whether you're going to go with the 6000 or the 4000. You can't play video on USB on either units, which makes the AX6000, again, the only unit that you can play video on via the USB, via the HDMI. So I'm going to go ahead and go through and show you what it looks like. So I'm going to go USB, and I'm going to go ahead and connect my USB drive up to the unit here and let it load. And so you can see it defaulted to what is on my drive, the first song. But what's important to demonstrate here, I think, is how you can go through your thumb drive, the structure of your thumb drive. You can see I'm in the root folder here, and you can navigate throughout all the directories and subdirectories of your USB drive to find the songs that you want to, whether you have those songs structured in directories by, in this case, by artist, and then by album, which is just what I did, and then click on the song that you want to play. And once you're playing the song, you can see you have the typical functionality here: next, previous, play, pause, repeat, and so on. So very straightforward, and does the job done, gets the job done. And if you have or you are the kind of person that likes to keep all your music on a thumb drive, you can certainly use that and use the folder structure to navigate and play whatever music that you want. I'm going to go back home. So finally, I saved the best for last here. I know there's probably a lot of you who are wondering, how can I play video on one of these head units, and how do I do that? Let's talk about the HDMI connection with the AX6000. I've went ahead and connected my Lightning to HDMI adapter here. You can see this is my test iPhone. So it's all connected to the back of the unit to demonstrate how this works. And the first thing that I'll say here is that I don't think anybody would sit here and recommend that you play video and watch video while you are the driver in this vehicle, right? Hopefully this is just for your passengers, right? But I've gone ahead and wired the head unit up so I can play video, to demonstrate one, how you play video, but also to do that while imitating that I'm not driving, right? So basically you can you can do this. You can set this unit up to play video while you're driving simply by wiring up that emergency brake wire. It's a green wire on the back of the harness, tying that directly into a ground wire to enable video while you're driving. Otherwise, it simply won't play. I've also double checked with the Sony team too regarding the GPS antenna and whether or not that GPS antenna would use your location and really prohibit video while you're in motion. You might have wondered that when you saw the GPS antenna. We talked about it earlier. I confirmed with them that as long as you have the emergency brake on, right, or you have that emergency brake wire grounded, the video would play while you're in motion. So that's what I'm actually going to imitate or mimic here in my setup here. I have it that emergency brake hooked up to a switch. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how you open up a couple apps and show them how to play video and in two different apps, Netflix and also YouTube. I think YouTube is a good one. So I'm going to go ahead and go in, click into the apps. Well, I already had it. Click HDMI. Boom, you see the screen that's mirrored on my phone now, just using my little test phone here. So if you didn't have your emergency brake wire hooked up or your emergency brake wasn't on, this is the screen that you would see here. The video is blocked for your safety. So in order to bypass that while you're in motion, you have to wire that emergency brake to ground. I've got that hooked up to a switch, which is what you're seeing me flip through here. So I'm just going to go ahead and hop into Netflix and demonstrate what it looks like. I already had a video playing, but essentially you're going to go and you're going to use your app to find whatever video you'd like to play. Let's just select whatever is on the top, and it'll orient the video however it's supposed to be. You don't have to worry about, how or where your phone is positioned. It'll automatically do that for you. Screen quality is great. The resolution on these units is pretty much identical across the board. Anything more in terms of resolution than what's on this unit really won't make too much of a visual impact because of the size of the screen, right? The other one I'm going to go through is YouTube. YouTube is pretty similar and straightforward as well. So I went ahead and I had a video playing here too, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to go ahead and play a video. I went ahead and searched, right? So you can go in, you're going to search for a video just like you normally would, and then you're going to select that video to play, whichever one you want. I'm going to play one of my own channel videos. It's going to probably play an ad, right? But once those ads go away, it'll do something similar to what the Netflix video did. It'll orient it and it's going to play it, and you're going to have audio, right? So in general, very easy to use. The HDMI feature, you select it and then you're in it, right? So that's all I'm going to demonstrate for the video purpose. Just know that it's very simple. You can use this for any app that you would like. Pretty much, for example, I use DirecTV Stream, so I could in theory use that in this as well. Great functionality to have. Again, the 6000 is the AX6000 is the only one that's going to have this functionality though for you. So let's go back out to the home page here. And there you have it, a quick-ish comparison between Sony's new AX6000 and 4000 head units, along with some of their new features. Really, the only big differences that I noticed between the two units were, one, the screen type, although the resolution between the two units are the same. The AX4000 has a different LCD screen and is also a resistive touchscreen, while the 6000 is capacitive. And you could see earlier in the video, there's just a slight difference in terms of the clarity and the overall brightness, hardly noticeable. The bezel on the AX6000 it's a flush bezel, while they call it bezel-less, while the AX4000 does have that bezel. 3 is the preamp output voltage, and those are the RCAs that are on the back of the unit that are used for an external amplifier. So if you're looking to amplify your system with an external amplifier, the 6000 is really the way to go, in my opinion, because it has a 5 volt versus a 2 volt, which is what the 4000 has. And then of course HDMI, the 6000 is the only unit of the two that offers video playback at all, since neither one of them can play video via USB right now, via that micro HDMI input in the rear. The rest of the features are near identical between them, including the entire interface, which is why I walked through the 6000 with you instead of doing both of them. The biggest upgrade that these units have to offer over, for example, some of the Sony's other recent units like the AX5600 and 5500 or 8100 head units, is that these two units have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is a really nice feature to have. You know, getting in and out of your car without having to plug it in to access CarPlay and Android Auto is much more convenient than you'd think once you get used to using those interfaces. And that's personally my preference over the traditional Bluetooth. I don't use Bluetooth anymore. So that's all I had today. Thanks again for watching. And of course, as always, please subscribe to our channel below to keep videos like this coming your way. Thanks again.